I hope everybody's year is off to a great start and that from today's webinar, you're able to gain some helpful new insight that can carry you forward with a better understanding of how our body functions and how that impacts how we eat, what we eat, and ultimately we want to aim to understand how that makes us feel as a result of our time together today. So to kick things off with a quick introduction, my name is Maddie Reeder, and I'm going to be your host for today. I'm a registered dietitian by training. I've been a registered dietitian for quite some time now, and I'm a clinical liaison for FoodSmart. And as I mentioned, for anybody just jumping on the call, I'm calling in from and live in North Carolina with my husband and our constantly hungry, very goofy pup Ghost, who I'm sure you've heard of on many of our calls. And she's always just as excited to talk about food and nutrition as I am. And joining me today, I have the wonderful Claire, who will be monitoring the chat as we go through the presentation. And she can help with any general questions about FoodSmart or scheduling your nutrition appointment, but feel free to ask any questions specifically for me via the Q&A icon or in the chat at the bottom of the screen. And we're going to answer as many of those questions as we can during our Q&A session at the end of our presentation. So first, let's give a brief overview of FoodSmart for those of you who are new to us. We are a digital nutrition platform whose goal is to make eating well simple for everyone. And we do this through one-on-one visits with registered dietitians just like myself to provide you with a personalized plan that is custom tailored to your lifestyle. Your dietitian will listen to your medical and family history, food preferences, cooking abilities, food budget, and so much more to give you the nutrition care that will actually work for you. Your registered dietitian, just like me, will also get you up and started with our FoodSmart platform, and that has recipes, a meal planner, grocery delivery features, and more to make eating well a very easy part of your routine. And if you have a specific goal in mind or a condition that you're trying to work through, we have created several programs to guide you along your journey. We have programs to help you with things like weight management, gut health, mindful eating, maternity nutrition, and so much more. The best way to find out what program is right for you is to set up your first meeting with your dietitian and talk through your goals. For those of you on our webinar today, I'm excited to tell you that we're giving you a code to receive a $15 Walmart gift card after your first visit with a dietitian. But in addition to that, we're also giving away a $250 Walmart gift card to one lucky person who signs up today. Simply use the code WEBINAR when you are scheduling your appointment. You can use the link in the chat, or you can go to foodsmart.com/schedule to sign up. And if you have any questions about scheduling or meeting with a dietitian, put them in the chat and we'll be happy to help during our time together today. So during our webinar today, we will review what hunger is and what that means for our bodies. We will uncover how hunger and fullness cues work and who hunger impacts the most and what effect it has on eating behavior and our mood. We will learn how to interpret those cues to develop a more intuitive way of eating. And finally, we'll provide some examples and an example day of eating that will help keep you full and satisfied. So being completely honest with all of you on the call today, I want to point out that this is a really challenging topic. Hunger and nutrition is something that's really hard to discuss, and I'm sure many people on the call feel the same. It's something that a lot of us struggle with, and many of us can relate to that feeling of a lack of control when it comes to their nutrition. And as a dietitian, I noticed that we collectively, as a group, whether when we're talking with each other or on social media or even in our news, we give a lot of power to hunger as if it's a living, breathing monster we have to fight against. And we have to win, because if we don't, we're not allowed to play in the healthy eating arena that so many people, social media sites, etc., discuss. So when we talk about diets and nutrition and we come to the topic of hunger, the common narrative is that we need to have the willpower to forget that we are hungry, that all we need is the mental fortitude and discipline to say no to those cues that we are getting, no matter how strong they are to eat. And I don't know about you, but for myself and for most people, there's no amount of discipline that is enough when I'm truly feeling hungry. And what I'm excited to share is that it's not a question of willpower or strength when it comes to hunger and nutrition. On the contrary, it's actually about understanding hunger and fullness cues, something that we're often not taught about very well, and using that knowledge to play to your body's unique strengths. And so when you look at the definition of hunger, it's pretty straightforward. If you've ever looked it up, which you probably haven't, but I have, being a dietitian, the definition of hunger is the strong desire to eat. That's it. I'm not pausing for a dramatic effect here. That's really all there is to the definition of pure hunger. And that's why there's so much confusion about combating hunger. The definition implies that hunger is entirely related to desire, a desire to eat for pleasure or because of a craving. But it doesn't speak to why we have that thought or feeling, that desire or craving. And it certainly doesn't offer any tools to deal with it. The universal nature of that definition of hunger also implies that everyone feels the same, which I know just from growing up in a house of diverse eaters and people with diverse dietary preferences is absolutely false. So hunger isn't nearly as simple as the definition, and there are actually several types of hunger. And depending on the context, there can be more than 7 different types of hunger, but fear not, we're just going to stick to understanding just 3 that will be helpful. And the 3 types of hunger we'll discuss today that you can see on your screen are hunger relating to physical necessity, hunger relating to the senses, and hunger relating to our emotions. So to start, I want to talk about body cues. And so your body releases hunger cues, which are hormones from the pituitary gland in your brain, as a signal informing you that it is time to eat. This is your body's intrinsic effort to keep you healthy and alive. But however, as we evolve and we grow throughout our lifetime, your body can learn different habits in the effort to cater specifically to your needs, which makes those cues vary greatly based on so many things. So some examples include things like your nutrition status, your hormones, hydration, the last thing you ate, your gut health, whether you're ill or have chronic conditions, taking medications, and even being around and smelling or seeing yummy, delicious food in your environment. And so that's quite a long list. And if you're like me, you're thinking, okay, that makes sense, but why? Understanding the why, at least for me as a dietitian and as a human being who loves to eat, helps me at least get to the first part of the problem. So as far as why goes, ghrelin and leptin are 2 of many hormones that control your appetite and your fullness. Leptin decreases your appetite and ghrelin increases it. Leptin is made in your fat cells and signals to your brain that you are feeling full. And ghrelin is made in your stomach, and that signals to your brain that you are feeling hungry. I remember them like this. Leptin equals low appetite, so you have your L and your L there, and ghrelin equals growl, like for hunger, so your stomach is growling. So in other words, leptin, that hormone, manages the long-term regulation of your energy balance by suppressing your food intake, telling you that it's had enough. Ghrelin is the opposite, on the other hand, and it is fast acting as a hormone, and it plays a role in your meal initiation. Ghrelin levels are primarily regulated by your regular food intake, and levels of ghrelin in the blood rise habitually and based on some other things that we'll talk about shortly, just before eating, and they also rise when you're fasting and starting to get hungry. So I'm giving you a lot of information here, and there's no need to memorize any of that. But knowing about these hormones and even just knowing that they exist helps to really emphasize that it's more than just about willpower here. There are lots of things going on in your body that we want to pay attention to and listen to in order to meet our goals. So now that we understand that hormones are responsible and what hormones we can hold responsible here, let's break down each type of hunger just a little bit further today. So first, we have physical hunger. And the most common cue is for physical hunger, you've probably guessed it, a growling stomach. And I know that my body needs food if my stomach is growling louder than my dog Ghost. So hunger relating to physical necessity is the most straightforward one. It's often what we think about, and it's what we talk to our children about when we're trying to teach them their body cues. The body actually needs more energy, and that's what it's telling us, more energy or nutrients. And it's releasing chemicals which make you feel that hunger. Sometimes this physical type of hunger is what we refer to as real hunger because it's the most easy to identify. But the other two types of hunger that we're about to cover are just as valid and important. So remember ghrelin we talked about just a moment ago? Well, ghrelin, that growling hunger hormone, is thought to play a role in those hunger pangs we feel in our bellies, and they cue our body physically that we need to eat. Next, I want to talk about hunger of the senses. And I don't want to torture anybody knowing what time of day it is across the country here, but I want you to think about a few things for me. Think about the sight of a birthday cake at a party, maybe your favorite one, or think about the smell of freshly baked cookies. I don't even have to tell you what kind of cookie it is. If you have a favorite, you can almost smell it right now. Or I want you to think about hearing the sizzle of the grill. Okay, so I'm not trying to torture all of you, but think about those things. And when you're around or even just thinking about food, your senses send signals to your brain to release chemicals that make you hungry. That's right. It's all in your head. I'm just kidding. It really is a real way that your body is, again, trying to protect you. Those feel-good chemicals we get when we eat good food are triggered at the sight, sound, and smell of said food. And that is another way that your body is sending signals in an effort to keep us safe and protect us. Over time, it tries its best to learn and respond to triggers to ensure that we stay fed and to survive. You're probably noticing a trend here. Our body's goal at the end of the day is not to work against us. It is to keep us healthy, alive, and ultimately very safe. And last but not least, I want to talk about emotional hunger. And I'm going to paint you another picture here, probably less torturous than the last one. So imagine you had a miserable day at work with your family, etc., and it makes you wish that life wasn't so stressful, be it consciously or subconsciously. Maybe you're actively thinking that in your head, or maybe you just have, the blues, and that's what's going through you internally. And so that leads you to crave something comforting. And somehow your brain reminds you of easy, comfortable childhood days where you had very little responsibilities. And before you're even connecting the dots about all of these feelings that you're having, you were reaching into the cabinet for your favorite mac and cheese for dinner. And as you make that mac and cheese and you sit down on the couch with the big bowl of deliciousness in front of you, it doesn't fix everything, but somehow you do feel better. You feel more at ease. Is anybody else with me? Does anybody else have a comfort food when you have a bad day? Put it in the chat. I love to hear what everyone's favorites are. But is anybody else with me and understand this feeling well? And I'm sure the answer is a big, resounding yes. And that happens because the hormones released when you're having a bad day serve as a cry for help to the body. When the body doesn't know what to do to fix it when it's in distress, it sends forth what it can to take you out of that distress. If food has helped you ease your pain in the past, then your body has learned that that works to take you out of distress. And it may try that again, hence the mac and cheese cravings that occur on those bad days that I was just mentioning. In case you're wondering, that is my go-to comfort food craving. Emotional hunger and eating is cyclical as well. So I always like to say when I'm meeting with members or patients, what came first, the emotion or the food? And it really depends. And that's why this is so challenging. Remember those feel-good hormones that we've been talking about? Well, those are also triggered when we eat certain foods too. And I bet I don't have to even say it because we all know which foods those are. Those are usually your carbohydrates and your sugars. Yep. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, depending on how you look at it, carbs are the fastest runners in the nutrition race that we have going. Because carbs, just the way that they are built, They are the quickest and the first food to be processed once we eat. No matter how we eat or in what order we eat our meals, carbs are processed more quickly because they are what feed the brain. And when they feed the brain, they signal brain activity faster than any other nutrients like your proteins or your fat-rich foods. So you eat because you feel emotion. Then your brain gets the, wow, this is amazing, and it's making me feel better signal. And then your body, being the hero that it is and trying to save you and keep you safe, misreads the cues to mean, okay, I need more, please. I need to keep feeling better. Give me more of that delicious, yummy food or something like it. So of course, then there's a flip side as well. Emotions, interestingly, can also impact hunger in the opposite direction so that we lose our appetite. So if you are like my husband a couple of weeks ago, you are so mad that the Eagles lost their football game that the thought of eating is completely gone from your mind. You can't even fathom eating something because you're so frustrated. Or maybe a completely different example, you found out that you're going on a vacation and you're so excited about your trip that food consumption is an afterthought because that anxious, excited energy is just having your brain spinning. This is yet another way that your body tries to keep you safe from over or under consumption. So emotions are, not surprisingly, of these three, the most complicated of the types of hunger because they're the most complex, and they're also the most individualized and the most difficult to understand. So now that we know what those three types of hunger are, and we've really highlighted the differences there, we can move on and discuss some other ways that they all tie together and how we can combat that hunger. So if you've been paying attention, you've probably thought that there's some overlap happening between those different categories. And yes, you are correct. That's why hunger simply can't have one easy definition or a one-size-fits-all answer. So how does understanding some of the causes of hunger help us better relate to it? And I'll give you a hint. We can't ignore it. We can't squash it, or trick ourselves out of feeling it, or willpower our way out. So say it with me. Hunger is there to protect us. It is there to keep us safe and alive. So instead, let's work on developing a relationship with hunger that allows us to notice when it is there, interpret why it might be coming up, and develop a few strategies to address it. So let's look at a few examples together today. All right, first, let's imagine it's 3 p.m. and you notice that you are feeling hungry, even though you just ate lunch a couple of hours ago. We're all probably familiar with this one. This is when we can intervene and practice the power of the pause here. Take a breath before you make any food decisions and rush to the pantry or back to your lunchbox to grab something to eat. You can feel, when you think about it, that empty belly feeling. Your stomach is growling and you've got the afternoon sleepies too. Maybe that's something that you're addressing as you're checking in mentally with your own body. And as you think about it, you're not really craving anything. You just kind of feel blah. You have those afternoon blahs and you have that empty belly feeling. And we all know what that feels like. So then you can think back onto your day and interpret that maybe you didn't eat enough during lunch, or maybe you didn't have the right balance of food because you packed your lunch in a hurry that day. So a strategy that you can employ might be grabbing a snack that is rich in protein and fats. Remember, leptin, our appetite suppressing hormone, is stored in our fat cells. And that will be both satisfying for those hunger hormones and also help to keep you full longer. So now that you have a clear head and you've had a snack, you can plan for a better tomorrow. You can make sure that your lunch is packed with a fibrous carbohydrate source, adequate protein, somewhere between 20 and 30 grams, and some healthy fats. So stopping and thinking about those physical cues sometimes feels silly, but thinking about what your senses are saying to you and how you feel is a skill, and it's a very important one. And this gives me a lot of hope, and it gives my members and patients I speak to at FoodSmart a lot of hope too, because it's a skill that's not willpower based. So that makes me at least want to jump for joy, because the skills that we can create, we can improve over time, which means that there's actually room for success, unlike willpower, which feels like something that's just a split-second choice that you either have or you don't. So now I want to take another example. So let's say that you notice that you are really, really wanting some chocolate after a tough day of work, and you had a poor night's sleep too. And it's all you can think about. And you have one special snack in your mind's eye, something sweet. And I know I've totally been there more recently than you'd probably like to know. But you take a pause when you notice that craving, and you interpret that your stress, which is a very powerful emotion when it comes to hunger, is the likely culprit for those extra sugar cravings. What makes stress worse? Say it with me: lack of sleep. We all know that very well. So a strategy here might be, one, give yourself some grace and have a piece of chocolate. Enjoy it. You are allowed. I'm here to be the registered dietitian to tell you that you're allowed to eat foods that you love and that make you happy. And it's okay to have something like chocolate or like your favorite treat when you're feeling stressed. I always suggest, if you can, pre-portioning a set amount for yourself before you start snacking, instead of eating right out of a package or container. That allows you to be in control and not your hunger hormones, and can actually feel really empowering for yourself when you're stressed. And once you finish that snack and you've really enjoyed it, are you still thinking about more chocolate or other snacks? That's the first thing I want you to think about. And if you are, but you're not having any other hunger symptoms, it truly feels like a desire or a craving, then that's when I want you to think that maybe there's something else going on. We're always so quick to blame ourselves and our bad habits for wanting to eat. Like, oh, I just had that candy bar and now I still want more. What's wrong with me? I've already messed up. So let's just dive right into the pantry head first. But instead, I want you to zoom out and look at the big picture of your life and what your body is trying to tell you. Those cravings, those desires, those feelings, that emotional hunger doesn't come from nowhere. So zoom out and think. You're stressed. Maybe what you really need is a distraction to get your mind to a better place. And so some of my favorite distractions are, and we all have ones that we love the best, are teaching myself a quick dance routine on YouTube, one of those 5 to 7 minute fun things that take me back to those childhood memories we talked about earlier. Maybe it's going for a walk and listening to my favorite podcast, or playing with my pup Ghost, or calling a friend that I haven't gotten to talk to for a while. Then I want you to focus on ways to improve your sleep, because we know that that has a big impact on our emotions and our hunger and fullness cues. So some examples of things we can do there: maybe ditching tech a few hours before bed, or getting back into a bedtime routine that you had before the holidays but fell off of through traveling and stress and chaos of all of those things that our holidays involve. And then managing stress itself. So not just the sleep component, but also looking at how do we improve our stress. So maybe that's taking a few things off your plate, or reaching out and asking someone for help, even with something small. It makes a big difference. Or maybe taking some time to practice meditation, finding a friend to talk to regularly, to vent with about some frustrations that you can't control in your life, etc. So here we are again. You'll see, just like our previous example, we are setting ourselves up for a better tomorrow, instead of really focusing on the issues of today and letting that define us. So here you can see that we're not ignoring our hunger in any of these scenarios. We're addressing it reasonably with our craving without going overboard, and we're addressing some of the causes of hunger to help us feel more balanced. But what I do want to say is that if you do go overboard, and I always like to stress this, especially in calls like these, and you eat your way through the whole pantry, or you eat that entire box of cookies, or you're snacking for hours on end, it is okay. Take a minute and think through those 3 types of hunger. Think of legitimate, the scientific reasons why you are feeling the way you're feeling. And then you can plan for that better tomorrow, instead of really beating yourself up for today. And you can do things one step at a time. One day, 1 week, 1 month even of a tough time does not make or break a lifetime of wellness, I promise you. And you are not ruined. You are not unmotivated. You're not failing if you take a misstep in your mind when it comes to your food and nutrition and the cravings or emotional food cues that you're getting. Remember that you make you who you are, not the hunger monster. And your body's processes are just science that need to be decoded. And it's not a lack of character or strength. So I always tell the people that I help with their hunger cues to take a breath, pause, and move on. Tomorrow is a new day, and even the next hour is a new hour. Okay, So let's talk about comparing ourselves to others now here before we move into our next topic. So when you're practicing these skills and you start to improve slowly over time, isn't it frustrating when it feels like others don't struggle as much? Why do you get more hungry than maybe your best friend does? And how come her body doesn't have all the hunger cues that your body does? It doesn't have the hunger pangs or the sudden random cravings for something seemingly for no reason, even though you live a similar lifestyle. Maybe you even look the same or act the same. Well, that is where our bodies, learned habits, our biology, and our outside factors in our life come into play. It's almost impossible, even if you were an identical twin, to live the exact same life and scenarios as somebody else. So remember, medications, this is quite a list here, but medications, medical conditions, genetics, illness, bone density, injury, diet, hydration, our surroundings, even the weather, your day-to-day lifestyle, stress, sleep, your muscle, fat, water ratio in your body, and more are all things that play into a role of those cues that our body sends us. So don't get caught up on what makes it easier or harder for you specifically. Instead, I want you to practice the pause we discussed and think really critically about what signals you're getting. Following all the steps that we've discussed and you're still starving, then maybe it's time to look at things in your environment a little bit more closely, like medications, for example, to see if something that you're taking increases appetite. Maybe you've eaten dinner at 8 p.m. for the last 40 years. This is one of my favorite examples that my family and I know very well. Maybe you've eaten dinner at 8 p.m. for the last 40 years or even your entire life, and now your schedule has changed for whatever reason. And even though you're eating dinner at 5 p.m. now, you have this familiar craving or desire to eat at 8 p.m. sharp every single night. And so maybe just noticing that environmental cue and that environmental time-based cue rather, and trying to find an 8 p.m. activity instead, if you aren't feeling physically hungry, that is, will help you shift your focus. And so while I can't play out every scenario here because everyone is so different, I want to give you a few general guidelines to help balance those hunger cues and some questions that you can ask yourself the next time that you're feeling hungry. So some general guidelines to balance those hunger cues. 1, make sure you are eating enough. No adult should be eating less than 1,500 calories a day, even though diet culture has skewed our perspective on how much we should eat, which causes a lot of us to chronically undereat. A registered dietitian like me can help you determine a precise amount, but generally speaking, aim for about 200 calories or more per day. Next, sleep. Aim for 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night. It's really, really important to keep your hormones balanced and those cravings and cues in check. Next, aim for adequate hydration. I always like to think about drinking half of your body weight in ounces every day, because sometimes our body mistakes our thirst cues for hunger because it can't differentiate between the two. So if you're feeling really hungry, you might be thirsty. And if you're always aiming to have adequate hydration throughout your entire day, then that is something that you don't have to pause and consider quite as regularly. And then you can work on decoding the other cues in your body. Next, balance out your blood sugar. This is really important because spikes and dips in blood sugar can cause a lot of variability in our hunger cues. Here we go. Our body is trying to protect us again. So balance your blood sugar by balancing your meals, like we talked about before, with proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, and limiting sugary snacks or drinks that don't have a good balance of those proteins and fats in them as well. Next, opt for more complex carbs, which are slower to digest in your body. So think of things like a sweet potato versus a French fry, or whole grain bread versus potato chips. They break down slower in your body over time because they contain more fiber, and that is a really important thing to help keep hunger at bay. Next, we want to incorporate even more high fiber foods, which help your stomach interpret fullness and balance your hunger hormones better. Things like your fruits, your vegetables, and your whole grains are great ways to do that. And then we want to increase the volume of your meals. So eating a large veggie stir fry, for example, will keep you much fuller than a power bar of equal calories because your stomach is physically fuller. I always like to think of your plate. If you're eating a full plate versus a power bar, which is only this big, this is going to take up more space in your belly and give you the feeling of fullness that a power bar, even though calorically the same, just cannot. So now next time you're feeling hungry, refer back to this list and do a mental check. Are you hitting all of these points, or are there areas where you can focus? Allow this list to help guide you into developing a strategy to better balance your hunger next time. And remember, you are not wrong for feeling hungry. You are not. Your body is doing what bodies do. The goal is not to never feel hungry. It's to understand the hunger and work to make sure that your body is getting the nutrients it needs so that our hunger is balanced and not a ravaging monster that we're constantly trying to run away from. So now at FoodSmart, we want to make sure that you have all the tools that you need, and we love to enjoy delicious food. So let's look at a typical day of meals and give you some inspiration for how to balance hunger every time you sit down to eat. And so let's start out with some meals that are labeled often the most important meal of the day, which is breakfast. So of course, knowing that breakfast is brain food doesn't make it any less challenging to come up with a nutritious breakfast every day. I recommend prepping 1 or 2 healthy breakfast items before the week begins. And I find that when I talk to most people, that's something that's a lot less common than meal prepping a lunch or a dinner. But prepping for breakfast is really, really important. And that way people don't end up eating a sugary bowl of cereal or grabbing a breakfast pastry on their way out the door and then end up hungry an hour later, like we talked about. So next, I want to share 3 great breakfast options that you can add to your FoodSmart meal plan to make over the weekend and eat throughout the week. So first, we have overnight oats. And the great thing about these is that you can set it and forget it. This is one of my personal favorites. And I recommend making them with milk, which adds a boost of satisfying protein and fats. And so just store it in a Tupperware container and reheat it in the microwave, or you can even eat them cold. That makes it even easier. You can also add nuts, seeds, fruits, and a lot of different flavors to suit your preferences. Next, we have veggie egg muffins, another favorite of mine. And you can bake up a batch and refrigerate or freeze them for a quick breakfast. Just reheat them in the microwave and pair with a piece of whole grain toast for a balanced breakfast that includes veggies. And if you have little ones at home, or even if you are an adult who veggies aren't quite your thing and you struggle to get them into your diet, my biggest tip is adding them in first thing in the morning. Then you can feel confident that you're starting the day with at least 1 serving of veggies checked off your list. And last, we have oatmeal protein pancakes. I love pancakes, and I'm sure many of us feel the same here on the call. And they're not only versatile, but they also store very well in both the fridge and the freezer, which I think a lot of us oftentimes forget. And these high protein pancakes are made from ground oats, which are a whole grain, and they can be topped with peanut or almond butter, fresh fruit, chocolate chips, or my favorite, you can add all 3, which is a lot of fun. So next, let's talk about lunch. And we want to aim to include at least 4 of the 5 food groups in your lunches, because the more food groups that make it onto your plate, the more balanced, nutritious, and filling your lunch will be. And so here are a few of my favorite make-ahead building blocks of lunch-friendly foods that can be mixed and matched for grain bowls, wraps, and salads. 1, chopped melon, pineapple, mango, grapes, apples, pear, and orange slices. 2, some veggies, all types of greens, shredded carrots, grape tomatoes, sliced bell peppers, broccoli or cauliflower, cucumber or zucchini sticks, or even baked kale chips. For proteins, chicken or tuna salad, reduced sodium deli turkey for wraps and sandwiches, hard-boiled eggs, beans and brown rice, garlicky chickpeas or beans, edamame, nuts, and nut butters are all great options. For dairy, you can do something like crumbled feta or goat cheese, cottage cheese, or Greek yogurt. And you can even add some seasonings into your Greek yogurt or your cottage cheese if you'd like. And for whole grains, whole grain pitas, sandwich bread and tortilla wraps, brown rice, and whole grain pastas are all really great examples. Next, we have got dinner, which is one of my most favorite things to talk about. And dinner is the meal where you're usually cooking for more than just one person, whether it's your kids, your spouse, your friends, etc. And there are lots of tastes to consider there, which can make it complicated. Dinner can creep up on you too after a busy day, just like we talked about in our mac and cheese example earlier on. And it's hard to muster up the brain power to get something nutrition on the table. And so often people lean on takeout or convenience foods or those comfort foods when they're in a pinch. So I have a few tips to help you make the most out of this sometimes challenging meal. So I like to follow a weekly dinner formula. And the first tip has probably helped me most when it comes to meal planning. If you're like me and you suffer from decision fatigue when it comes to food or meal planning, especially at the end of the day, a simple dinner formula can help you simplify how you think about this meal. And my weekly dinner formula looks something like this. One vegetarian meal, veggie enchiladas is a great example. One chicken and or poultry meal. We've got sheet pan roasted chicken and vegetables. Then we have a fish, maybe a shrimp and grits, for example, and one pork and or beef option. So a cocoa chili rubbed pork tenderloin with black beans and salad is a great and very, very delicious option. If you're vegetarian or plant-based, you can simply swap out the meat options I mentioned here for alternatives like tofu, tempeh, beans, etc. There's lots of really great options out there. Pick for your preference. I jot this formula down on a piece of scrap paper each Sunday, and I fill in 1 or 2 meals for each category, depending on how many meals we'll be eating at home that week. I strategically will schedule fast or make ahead dishes and leftovers for our busiest nights, whether that's busy with obligations with families or friends or work schedules. So next, I want to go into some of our main takeaways from our conversation today. You will feel hungry, point blank, and you will feel hungry for many different reasons, but none of them are bad or wrong. The point of our conversation today is not to talk about how hunger is a bad thing. It's talking about how we can listen to our body's cues and how we should always honor our body and eat when we are feeling hungry. It's what your body is telling you that it needs. But do take note of why you're feeling that hunger so that you can create strategies for the future. Do you need to eat more throughout the day, have higher protein meals, or maybe prep a healthy breakfast? Truly give it some thought. Planning and prepping balanced meals and snacks will ensure that you always have a filling and nutritious meal on hand. And rotating out different meals with different flavors will help keep you from getting bored and leaning on eating out or heating up convenience foods that will leave you feeling hungry within an hour. So next, I want to pause and answer some questions I've seen coming through the chat here today. And I'll have Claire help me tee some of those up. Thank you all so much for some great questions. And let's get started and going through those. Okay.
Maddie, I can kick us off with, back on camera here. I can kick us off with a good one that I saw come through the chat. And this came through when you were talking about choosing a high protein, high fat snack for when you're feeling hungry. And someone asked, so how come when I'm getting heavier, I'm assuming they mean in weight, I'm still feeling so hungry? Wouldn't my body fat be telling me that I'm full? If you're saying that the leptin comes from the fat, I'm not the science expert here. So
Yes.
If you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, really great question. And that's a hard one to answer too, because our body is feeling hunger for a lot of different reasons, even despite what your weight is. And the reason is because we get those cues not only from those fat cells, but sometimes we get conflicting cues from the habits that we've created, what our diet is looking like throughout the day, and so on. So I always like to talk about the hormones because I think it really helps you to understand that it's just not all of your fault. But a lot of times it's the habits within our body that make us feel so hungry. So your leptin and ghrelin, those hormones, as they shift and change over time, your appetite will get better. And as your weight changes and fluctuates, that will cause changes as well. But the biggest thing to focus on is those habits. And so if you're trying to change your diet and you're trying to change your weight and you find that you're still hungry all the time, I want you to take a look at the foods that you're eating more than what the number is on the scale or how that has changed. So think about in a day, how balanced is your diet and how balanced is it throughout the day as well? So are you eating a lot of carbs in the morning, but you're only eating your fats and proteins in the evening, or vice versa? Maybe you are forgetting about carbs until the evening time when that hunger monster comes into play. Really providing your body with a balanced breakfast, lunch, dinner, and your snacks too will help your body learn what cues it should be listening to and if it's really hungry. And then that will help that ghrelin and that leptin over time that is in your fat cells and in your belly. It will help them to create more honest cues for you going forward. Really, really great question. Another one I saw come through that I really liked is any tips on not feeling hungry for days at a time. Such a good question, because oftentimes I'll see people ask, or I'll have people ask me, I did all the right things on Monday, but I was still hungry Monday, and I was still hungry Tuesday and Wednesday. And I feel like I'm doing all the right things. What's going on? So look at your week really holistically and make sure that you are eating well, not just Monday, but all the other days of the week. Additionally, our habits are really, really important. Your body is sending you those habitual cues. That 8 p.m. example where I'm eating dinner at 5 now, but I'm still hungry at 8, even though I haven't eaten dinner at 8 for 6 months. What's going on? Your body really leans into those habits to keep you safe. So the first thing that you can do when you're feeling hungry for days at a time is get yourself on a schedule, both a sleep schedule and a food and nutrition schedule. Try your best. I know it is so hard, especially these days, but try your best to go to bed and wake up at the same time and eat at the same times every day for a couple of weeks. That will help you a lot. And when you're feeling hungry, especially those first couple of days as you're getting yourself on a schedule, look at each meal and make sure it's well-rounded, number one. Number two, really lean on your hydration status as well. Maybe you aren't drinking enough water and your body is really thirsty, especially as you're changing your habits in your schedule. So make sure you're having enough water as well. And that will really help you to not feel hungry for days and days on end. And it will get easier over time. So don't beat yourself up. Take it one day, one meal at a time, and keep your well-roundedness in mind of your meal, but also your hydration status there too.
Awesome. These are such good tips.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of questions come through about intermittent fasting. Some people saying that it really worked to kind of fix their hunger, and some people questioning the healthiness of it and is it actually good for you? So could you talk about that a little bit?
Oh yeah, this is like the burning question of 2023. I feel like this has been really, really common, something that I've been asked a lot about. When it comes to intermittent fasting, there are several different types of intermittent fasting, if you will. For some people, it's truly just, I don't eat as late in the evening and I don't eat immediately when I first get up in the morning, and it helps me stay on a better schedule. And that has helped me to teach myself about my hunger fullness cues. When you're thinking about intermittent fasting like that, maybe it's, okay, I'm not going to eat after 11 p.m. anymore because I really need to wind down for bed. And then when I wake up in the morning, maybe I get myself ready, have a glass of water, and then I eat. There's a healthy way to do intermittent fasting if we're talking about it like that. Generally speaking, if somebody asks me point blank, is intermittent fasting good or bad? I hesitate to say yes or no, because there's always a way that you can do it unhealthfully that can be harmful for your body. If you fast for too long during the day, it can cause really significant increases and decreases in your blood sugar that can be really harmful to your body. And so you need to take a couple things into account if you're going to intermittent fast, which are your past and family medical history, any current conditions that you may have, medications, and how much you are eating in that small window of time where you're allowing yourself to eat. Generally, I try to recommend just a balanced diet throughout the day and a schedule versus intermittent fasting specifically, because I think that that is one, more realistic and easier to stick to. And two, it fits into your lifestyle and it helps you to find appreciation for those body cues and really listen to what your body's telling you. And that not only helps you with your weight and your hunger, but that also helps you later on in your life or as things happen. Listening to, and Claire, like I know we've talked about this before, just as colleagues and friends, but listening to your body cues is so easy when you are young. And it becomes so hard the older you get, because we're told to ignore those things very, very early in our lives. We're told, don't cry, put that emotion aside. We're told, even like suppress your cough in a crowded room. Goodness, you don't want anybody to, feel like you're interrupting them, or, we were just told to let those things go. And a lot of it makes sense. And that's just part of existing as a human being in a world of other human beings. But the more you can appreciate and listen to your body's cues when it comes to hunger, the more you'll notice other things about your body. And you might be able to find that really helpful in a lot of ways. So loaded answer there, but a loaded question too. Great one.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you see any that stand out to you, or do you want me to keep reading off what I see?
Yeah, I have a really good one. And this one is near and dear to my heart, just as with my history as a registered dietitian. And this one says, the big question I have coming in is, how might I help an elderly relative who doesn't feel hungry and isn't eating enough? So we're talking a lot about people especially in our presentation and what we saw on our screen today, we're talking a lot about what to do if you're too hungry. Well, what do you do if you're not hungry at all? We all need to eat, whether we are feeling those cues or not. And my advice is very similar to the hunger cues. It's just reverse. So if somebody is not feeling hungry, we need to kind of look at why. Why are they not feeling hungry? So I'll speak from an elderly relative's perspective that I was just talking to. They're never feeling hungry. They're not eating. They're losing weight. And maybe they're not losing weight. I can't physically see it, but I can tell they're losing that muscle strength. They're not able to do what they were able to do before. Okay, well, why aren't they eating? Well, they had 4 cups of coffee for breakfast and 3 glasses of juice. Now they're not hungry and they haven't moved around a lot. So their body doesn't have a need to burn energy that it did maybe when they were younger. So looking at those sorts of things of like, why am I not feeling hungry? Why am I feeling full? Why is the desire not to eat there? And really being a detective when it comes to your loved ones' day-to-day lifestyle and their diet is how you're going to help with that. So if you're trying to get them to eat, and it's important, maybe then you cut back on some beverages, because beverages take up room in your stomach and we want to make sure we're staying hydrated, but maybe we are drinking at times that are spaced out well between meals. So we're not having, a gallon of water before we're about to eat breakfast, right? Because it's going to take up too much room in your belly. Maybe if you want to induce some hunger, if you can, you get them out and moving a little bit more, taking some walks, doing some chair yoga, even just sitting and talking. I'm a very expressive person. I talk with my hands. That all makes a difference too. Those sorts of things are really important. So being a detective when it comes to your loved one, and think, if I were them, or if you can talk to them, have them think about it. Why would I not be hungry? Why would I not want to eat? And really decoding it that way. Really great question.
That is a really great question. And I'm sure something that so many of us feel who are taking care of elderly relatives.
Mm-hmm. Another one that I see coming in, and it's a couple different questions, so I'm going to try to put them all together, is what if you have a condition that makes you feel more hungry or thirsty than most people? How are you supposed to listen to those body cues and trust that they are accurate? And what do you do if they're not? How do you help yourself? That's really hard. That's why hunger and nutrition, it's so much easier for, books and social media and people on the news to say, just use willpower. You can figure it out if you can just power on through it, because decoding why you're hungry is really challenging. And I don't want to put that lightly. I always like to give the power back to you and let you know that you're not alone in struggling with these sorts of things, especially if you have pre-existing conditions. So step 1, of course, listen to your body. Think about, okay, I'm hungry. I'm hungry all the time. Why? Did I eat enough? Yes. Okay, good. Did I drink enough? Sure. Am I on a schedule? Great. So go down your list like a detective. Next, if you've gone down your list and you're still coming up blank, you're confused, then you want to look at environmental factors. What's my lifestyle schedule? What's all that look like? What medications am I taking? If you still can't figure anything out there, next step is going and talking to a professional, whether you start with a dietitian who can help you decode some of these things a little bit more clearly. Maybe you go to your primary care doctor and get some labs done, and looking at that is the next step there. Because sometimes when you've gone through all those cues, then you need some professional help to help take it one step further. What's great too, and I always encourage this for my family and my friends as well, is if you can go to your doctor by the time you have gone through those phases of determining your hunger, and you can give them that information, you can skip steps in the process to help them help you. How often do you go to your doctor and you sit in front of them and they're like, okay, what's wrong? Have you tried this? Have you tried making a food diary? Have you tried going to bed earlier? And you're kind of like, no, but I guess I can try that. But you know in your gut that something bigger is wrong. If you can be a good detective, keep this information, take that when you go to your appointment, you are already so many more steps ahead, and you should be proud of that. And you can be proud to tell your doctor that, so you can work together and find a faster solution for you.
That is such good advice. There is nothing worse than going to the doctor, paying a copay just for them to say, well, journal what you're eating for 2 weeks and then come back to me and pay another copay. I'm like,
yes.
Yes.
And you're like, okay, yeah, right. That's important. But I also just know myself and I know my body, and something bigger is wrong. And that's why like relearning those cues, so important. Somebody asked what lab work in particular. I just saw that come through a couple times actually. And it depends. Everyone's going to be really different. And I, as a dietitian, never like to make specific recommendations on what lab work you should look into, but always looking at your hormones, your blood sugar levels, and just a general panel is a really great place to start. And your doctor, when you sit in front of your primary care doctor, you tell them your symptoms, you tell them the cues you've looked at and what you've already tried, they will then be able to put some things together in their own brain using the knowledge that they have and make really good recommendations for what labs you should get looked at.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good plug for you to get your annual physical done every year, because they always do that blood work. So they'll
Yes,
if anything looks weird.
Exactly. That's exactly right. These are some really great and thoughtful questions here. Claire, do you see any others that really stand out to you today?
Yeah, I'm seeing a few questions on the hydration goals that you mentioned.
Yeah.
So someone gave an example for people who are not in the US and aren't familiar with pounds and fluid ounces and stuff. Are you saying that someone, let's say someone weighs 150 pounds, should they be drinking 75 fluid ounces of water per day? And then I saw on the similar note, someone ask, what about people who just really hate drinking water? Because you know those people exist. So how can they get that hydration in?
Yes, really great question. And to answer, that's correct. So you would have half of your body weight in pounds in ounces of water. So that was what it would be. And generally speaking, everyone is so different. So it's hard on a webinar like this to make a solid recommendation. But more than anything, most of us are so severely dehydrated and don't know it that just look at I always encourage people to start, instead of doing the calculation, just start by looking at your day and thinking, has it been like 4 hours since I've had water? That's a long time. I probably should have some water. It's important. So think about it like that. And if you really hate water, so I have a younger brother who has hated water his entire life. So you're not alone. There's a lot of us like that. And sometimes I don't want to drink water either. Ways to stay hydrated it's more than just water itself. First, you can always try flavoring your water, add some lemon, add some lime juice. You can even add a little bit, like a splash of a fruit juice, like a sugar-free fruit juice, just to give it a little pizzazz is really important. You can do that too. Sparkling water is also hydrating. If you like that, great. That's a great way to do it. Another thing that you can do is, if you were like, okay, great recommendations, Maddie, but that's still water. I hate it. Other fluids are waters too. And also your fruits and vegetables contain water as well. We forget that so often. So really looking at your fruit and vegetable intake and maybe increasing that a little bit will help with your hydration status. And also know that other beverages, even though they might not be as beneficial as water, they still count. So if you're having other beverages instead of water, just make sure you choose things that are low in sugar, and as low in sugar as you possibly can, and look at what else is in them. It's important. Just read your ingredients, try to pick something that has as few ingredients as possible so that the focus is on hydration, not on anything else in that beverage.
Awesome.
Great. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for such thoughtful questions. I love doing webinars like these where we can talk about the struggles that we all have as human beings when it comes to food and nutrition. We're not alone. These things are challenging, but FoodSmart is here to support you in whatever you need. And you can meet with a registered dietitian just like me. We have an amazing team of RDs who can talk all of these things through with you and decode what your body cues are saying to you and help you meet your goals. So thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure as always, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.
Thank you all. Happy 2023. Bye.